And we had this question before posed to us about the whole what happens if a darknet market is run in Russia and they get busted? Is there any incentive to bust them? What happens if they do get busted? What's the sentence? And now we know. What's up, everyone? So today we have some pretty crazy news, kind of like a Russian Ross Ulbricht kind of came onto the scene. Hydra, basically out of nowhere. One of the world's largest darknet markets, or the head guy of it, was sentenced to life in prison over in Russia. Hydra was an absolutely massive operation that existed on the darknet. And it basically dealt in drugs and counterfeit money and stolen credit cards and fake documents and hacking services, pretty much everything. It even offered financial services like washing and crypto laundering, basically, and exchanges between cryptocurrency and Russian rubles. Hydra started in 2015 and really took off around 2017. And that's when it basically became a major international platform. Obviously, operated on Tor, as the vast majority of markets do. There are some that operate outside of it, but it's 17 million customers and 19,000 vendors. At its peak, was worth 1.3 billion. Now, Russia's operations and crackdown started taking place from 2015 to late 2018. And that's when Hydra basically operated across Russia and Belarus, growing into a massive criminal network. During this time, Hydra expanded its customer and vendor base, significantly developed things like sophisticated money laundering techniques, and set up large-scale drug manufacturing and distribution to back its own self up and kind of double down on its money-making. It made it a major player on the darknet markets, and law enforcement started cracking down in late 2018, because that's how long it took them to actually notice. But it wasn't until April of 2022, German and American authorities fully shut it down, because it takes them years, because they have to look for OPSEC mistakes, basically, which are typically stupid. They took over Hydra's servers in Germany and seized 25 million worth of Bitcoin. This takedown was what they said was basically a joint effort between the German police, the U.S. agencies, FBI, DEA, IRS, Homeland Security, all the ones that they always mention and say were a part of it. They always say the collaboration was critical because of it spans multiple countries and combined resources and jurisdiction, all that other stuff. They cite that as the rationale for coming together. I think it's just because they have to, because they can't do it solo. Sentencing and seizure. The Moscow Regional Court sentenced Hydra's leader and 15 others that were actually involved. Depending on their roles, they all got different sentences. One got 8 years and another got 23. They're going to really crappy prisons, from my understanding, but along with fines totaling 16 million rubles. The leader got life in prison and a fine of 4 million rubles, though he's never going to pay that. The Russian state didn't just stop with prison sentences. They also kind of took a page from the American feds and seized everything that they could. And this included cars and land and real estate, and basically all of it got forfeited to the state, which is really kind of wild if you think about it, just in a general kind of observation way. Imagine building the world's biggest darknet market and then having basically everything ripped away from you. And the same thing happens in the U.S., and I understand that because I've been through it, but it's really incredible that you can go and build an entire empire or business and it just disappears. But it's one of the reasons why I always try to advocate for people who actually are thinking about it, because if you're going to put that much energy into something like that, make sure it has longevity, because if it doesn't have longevity, it doesn't have shit. But during the raids, law enforcement found almost a ton, literally a ton, of narcotics and psychotropic substances that were stashed away in garages and put in special compartments that were hidden compartments. Basically, these guys were making and manufacturing their own narcotics. It took their operation to a whole different level. Now, Hydra wasn't just about selling drugs. It was a huge part of the larger cybercrime world. It helped criminals launder money through crypto mixing services, which I've said a bunch of times on this channel that I really don't like. I don't like them at all because there's a great unknown I feel with them, but it's a side issue. But you'd use them to basically cash out dirty money. Now, this included using Russia's servers like QIWI or Tinkoff, and eventually an underground cash burial system for extra secrecy, which is kind of awesome. But the cash burial system called CLAD was a method where people would buy rubles with cryptocurrency, and then couriers would bury the cash in hidden locations. And there's actually a handbook for this I wanted to get into and really talk about, and I will eventually, but it's a different video. But buyers would receive the coordinates and basically go and dig up the money themselves. And it was definitely risky, as the cash could be stolen or discovered by someone, or authorities could be laying in wait. But for many, it was worth it to avoid leaving a digital trail. About half of the $2 billion in cryptocurrency that Hydra actually received in 2021 and 2022 came from illegal or risky sources. And when I say that, I mean things like ransomware, scams, or like other darknet markets specifically. And which leads us to their whole downfall. Hydra was fairly well organized and used secure channels to communicate and secret spots, which are called caches or dead drops, depending on who you talk to distribute drugs without direct contact. Even though the Moscow Regional Court didn't publicly link all the defendants to Hydra, the evidence was strong enough, they say, to get them convicted on organized crime and drug charges. But something tells me at the end of the day that if you're in Russia and they want to charge you with something, the evidence is always going to be strong enough. And like, don't get it twisted. I'm not talking badly about Russia. So at the end of the day, like, we have the exact same thing here. We're all like, I think by and large, all of us are kind of under that kind of government tyranny to some extent. Now, Hydra became a major hub for things like illegal activity, obviously, from drugs to counterfeit money, like I was saying earlier. Its use of encryption and the scale of its operation made it really difficult to take down, according to the statements given by law enforcement. But eventually, even a broken clock's right twice a day, so it only takes time sometimes. After years of investigating, and obviously a few OPSEC slip-ups that they're not going to tell us about, the main players are now in prison. And shutting down Hydra obviously had a massive ripple effect as far as drug trafficking and the cyber criminal economy in general. The sentences can still be appealed, but with all the evidence, it's unlikely they'll get reduced. And it's like, I would make the same argument if they were in America. Just good luck getting an appeal. It's very, very difficult to win an appeal. And it can take 5 years to actually get one here in the States. The story, though, brings up some questions about things like the Darknet and what law enforcement can actually achieve. In my opinion, it's not very much, but Hydra's billion-dollar success drew in tons and tons of users. But its collapse also shows how risky it all actually is. Are these punishments actually enough to stop or dissuade people from trying the same thing for profit? And the answer to that is no. No. Anytime that you make anything illegal, you're going to thereby motivate a good portion of the populace who is not, they're not the well-off economically to pursue other means of generating revenue. And there's always going to be someone at the end of the day who's willing to step out of that box and do something risky in order to make a good amount of money or to provide for their family, or in some cases, buy a Lexus. Like, teach his own. But you're always going to have economic crimes like that. In any case, I digress. I'm getting off on a tangent on a side issue. I wanted to bring that up. It was interesting to see that another Darknet Market admin was given life. And we had this question before posed to us about the whole what happens if a Darknet Market is run in Russia and they get busted? Is there any incentive to bust them? What happens if they do get busted? What's the sentence? And now we know the sentence, if it's like egregious enough, is a life sentence. It's always interesting to see how these things unfold and see what other countries do. Because for the longest time, I've watched other countries where someone can go and sell $200 million worth of drugs and end up getting a couple year or two, almost nothing, which, in my opinion, kind of is how it should be, considering the fact that he didn't hurt anyone. Anyways, this is a side issue I'm not going to get into right now. Thank you for watching to the end. As always, guys, I really appreciate your support, and I will see you in the next video.